And I know that you are the first, the earliest to know Bob. Tell us about that. You told me on the telephone.
Well, I was still at home in Chicago, and I was just beginning at that time, more or less, to study. I'd been to music school and had taken my degree as a voice major, but one of the teachers said, I think you may need a vocal rest, he said, because you're in a little vocal trouble. So I said, fine. So in the meantime, I had started taking some dance. Although I had never studied formally, I was a very good ballroom dancer in high school and did a lot of that with friends. And so I started. Some of the singers from school, from college, used to come back and say, well, when you go to New York and you have to audition as a singer, nowadays you have to be able to move also. So I said, well, all right. So there was a woman teaching at school, and I started taking lessons with Elsie. And during the time, I've gradually started to work professionally in Chicago. Well, there came a time when Martin and Lewis were playing at the Chez Paris in Chicago, which is a big nightclub, and they were doing their act. And at the same time, they had a Sunday night television show. So they did the show, of course, from Chicago on those Sundays. And one of the shows, they had put out an audition for male dancers. So naturally, I went, and it ended up that Bobby was the choreographer. And I don't remember definitely whether he and Marianne might have been the opening act for the at Chez Paris. But anyway, Bobby was doing this number for the television show, and it was a typical Fosse white tie and tails number, to Stepping Out with My Baby. So we were all, there were maybe 8 or 12 boys, that was all, and we did this big production number on the television show. And that was the first time I had more or less ever auditioned for him, and the first time I met him. And a couple of years later, when I came to New York, one of the first shows I auditioned for was Pajama Game. And during the audition, at one point he had stopped the audition, he came over and he says, don't I know you? And I said, well, I said, Mr. Fosse, I said, I did work for you in Chicago at the Chez Paris. And he says, oh, I thought you looked familiar. And I said, he said, well, thanks for coming. And he said, unfortunately, he said, I don't think I can use you in the show because we're looking for Midwestern types. And I said, well, Bobby, I was born and raised in Chicago. Isn't that Midwestern? He said, yeah. He said, but we're looking more for factory types. He says, and you don't really think you look like a factory worker, do you? I said, not really. He said, he said, don't waste the rest of your time. He said, maybe the next time. So it was a nice second introduction to him anyway, and it eventually worked out fine in the long run.